Hello Soundies, welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 23rd of January 2022. It's great to have you here. I didn't put it on the agenda, but I think some of you probably have heard about the new Zoom F3 announcement. We're actually, they haven't even announced it in the United States yet, only in Japan as far as I can tell, but we will certainly be coming back to that at some point. I just wanted to say, yes, heard about it. Great news. Looking forward to learning more about it, and we'll probably talk about that here before too long. Let's jump into our agenda and show you what we've got going for today. So first up, we're going to take a look at the SoundDevices 8 series setup, and we're just going to cover kind of the basics there. The point of this is not because all of you have 833s or 888s or Scorpios sitting around your house and you need to know how to operate them. I realize that. The reason I wanted to cover this is for those that have never had an opportunity to get their hands on one, I wanted to give you a little bit of a chance to see what it's like and how you work with it, how you get channels set up, how you do the other setup for wireless inputs, all those sort of things. So that's the reason I wanted to share that with you. And incidentally, all of this really pretty much applies to the 833. It also applies to the bigger brother of the 888, which is called the Scorpio. So the difference is primarily in the number of inputs and outputs each of them have, and there are some other very small differences as well, but otherwise what we're going to talk about here applies to all of them. And then of course we have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then of course we'll go to our chat after that as well. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the overhead camera and we'll take a look at the 888. Let me give you a little tour here. So I've got it kind of disassembled. It's out of its bag. Normally it sits in a bag, and right here on the side, you see this cable here. This is the cable that comes from the battery distribution system. And I don't have that really, it's kind of a tangled mess over here. But the idea is I have actually 3 batteries connected to that, and 2 smart batteries. If you've never seen these before, let me just see if I can pull one of these up here. They look like this. They are, what's the capacity on these? I'm trying to remember. 98 watt hours is what they're rated at. And they have this little sort of receiver cup that you plug them into, so you can pop them out and pop a new one in. I've got 2 of these connected to the battery distribution system, and then I've also got a much larger battery on the bottom of my cart that also attaches into the battery distribution system. So in this case, for a battery distribution system, I'm using the PSC Triple Play, it's called. And the reason I went with that one for the 888 was that it has 3 different power inputs. So depending on whether I have available AC power, I can pop one of those others out, one of the smart battery inputs out, and plug in an AC adapter. I've got the big, huge battery. I don't even remember what its capacity is. So I've got lots of options there to keep things powered. The reality is with these newer generation mixer recorders like the 888, they use several FPGAs, and those tend to be a little bit more power hungry, so they do burn through power a little bit more quickly. All right, so let me give you, actually, I guess a tour up here. So this attachment on the top here, where you see these cables coming off, this is called the SL2. It's a slot system for slot type of receivers. So here we have 2 audio limited A10 dual channel receivers. So I have a total of 4 channels of audio coming in here. And part of the advantage, there are several advantages to having this slot attachment here. One of them, of course, is that you don't have to have extra cables within your bag. So bags can get pretty messy in terms of all the cabling you have to run everywhere. What this does is it actually there's a hard connection underneath here that taps into the top of the 888 or the 833 or the Scorpio, and sends all of the data and power for these as well. So it actually powers these from the 888 as well. It also sends digital audio, so we get 4 channels of digital audio, plus it has some additional AES digital inputs. So if I have, getting a feed of audio from another mixer perhaps that has a digital audio output, I can bring that into here and interface it into the 888 without taking up more of the analog inputs over here on the left side. What else does it do? It also provides some integration, so I can do an RF scan when this is attached directly here on the 888, and allows me to set some of the settings as well. So it just makes things a lot more convenient when you're working with multiple channels there. All right, you see we have a bunch of knobs and switches and retractable knobs. Let me just show you how this is set up here. So with physical controls, I can control 8 channels of audio. And in fact, over here on the left-hand side, I have 4 full-size XLR inputs. The first one is actually switchable between AES and digital, and or is it the fourth? It's one of them is switchable between an analog input, which would just be a single channel, or it can be switched to digital input, in which case it can bring in 2 channels of audio. And then in addition to those 4 full-size XLR inputs, we have 4 more TA3. Are they F or are they male? It looks like they're. Don't use those a lot, but they're actually male inputs, I believe. In any case, you can bring in 4 more channels of audio on the left-hand side here. So I have the physical controls to control all of those inputs. Now, this actually, as a mixer, can actually control up to 16 channels. So if I needed to handle any of the additional channels beyond that, I can do that here in the menu here. So I might have to come in, for example, if I wanted to set up channel 9, here's the channel 9 setup menu. And you might ask yourself, well, how are you going to get those additional channels in? Well, that's one of the things about the 888 and the Scorpio is that I do have an RJ45 jack on the back here for an Ethernet cable. I can actually bring in additional Dante channels to this as well. So I can bring those in and control those through that menu I just showed you there. But let's talk about a more kind of the type of thing you would do when you're using this as a field recorder, the more traditional kind of setup. And I'm going to go ahead and connect to channel number 1. I'm going to connect a boom microphone, and then I'm going to set up 2 channels of wireless as well using the A10 system here and how that's integrated. So the first thing you see across the top is we have these series of switches, and those switches allow you to get into the input menus for each input. So if I move this top switch here to the left, that puts me in the channel 1 input menu. You can see it's actually flashing a message to us telling us that channel is currently off. If I want to go to channel 2, I move that second switch to the left, channel 3, third switch to the left, and 4, that channel to the left. Now, if I want to get to channel 5, I move this channel to the right, and that'll take me into, channel number 5, and 6, 7, and 8, and so on and so forth. So let's go back to channel number 1. Now, this one is flashing that channel number 1 is powered off. How do you power it on? You push in to bring out this gain knob. This is the gain trim right here, this smaller knob. And then I turn that to the right. And you can see it's controlling my gain. You can see the trim number is changing there. Of course, we have up to 76 dB of gain that we can apply. I'm going to go ahead and put that right around there for now. So that's how you turn the channel on. And of course, you can see now that this is flashing, indicating that this channel is on. This is the fader for channel 1, the bigger knob. I'm going to go ahead and move that to 0. And you can see we get the readout right here. As I move that, you can see where that fader is positioned. There's also a calibration feature here within it. So if things start to drift over time, you can come back in and get that back where you need it to be. All right, so let's go ahead and tell it what we want to input. So the interesting thing with the 888 is that it is, and all of the 8 series, is it's fully routable. So we can choose what we're going to control with these set of controls here, this gain trim and this fader knob. And the way we do that is we come into this menu, and I can take input from any of these channels here. So I can bring in audio from Dante. I can bring in audio from one of the 4 AES inputs on the SL2. I can bring in audio. This SL2 is actually capable of hosting 2 4-channel receivers. So I can bring in up to 8 channels of audio via the slots, the 2 slots, and those are indicated here. Of course, as I mentioned before, we have the 8 physical inputs on the 888. So I can choose one of those. We're going to keep this one really simple, though. I have a microphone here connected up to input number 1. So we're going to use this as our boom microphone. And as a boom microphone, I'm going to use, in this case, a Sennheiser MKH416. So that's going to need some phantom power. So I just move this switch here. Phantom power is now on. And also down here at the bottom, if I wanted to switch to line level, so if I was getting audio from another mixer or something like that, I would switch this to line level or any other sort of line input source. There could be some, like a keyboard as well, if you wanted to, for some reason, bring that in. Here you could switch that. So to get back out, we're going to go ahead and press the menu button. That takes us back to our channel 1 menu. You can see we're getting a little bit of level here now. As I go ahead and adjust the trim here, we can get our gain set where we'd like it. I think a big question that comes from people as they're first learning about audio recording is, where should I set my gain? Where should my trim be? And I'm going to use those terms interchangeably, gain and trim. And that refers to the amplification that you're applying to the microphone signal. So as the microphone signal comes in, microphones produce fairly weak output signals, relatively speaking. And what we're doing is we're using our preamplifier here to apply some gain or amplification to increase the level of that signal overall up to line level. And the question is, okay, well, when I'm talking, where should it be? Where should the meter be topping out? And I think it really depends on the situation. So if you're recording something that's scripted and you know that there's not going to be any yelling or laughing or anything else coming up, you can push that a little bit harder. And I probably wouldn't go much beyond -12 generally. And in fact, you can see as we do go a little bit beyond 12, you can see we're bumping into the limiter there. And what the limiter is doing is just preventing the audio from distorting, from pushing up against 0 dB full scale and distorting. So this is a digital meter, a digital full scale meter. So typically for, if I'm working on a narrative piece where there's going to be a little bit more interpretation by the actors, I would probably not push the gain quite so hard. So I would definitely have the peak sitting down closer to, let's see, let me give you a demonstration here. I'd probably be somewhere more in this level right here. The 888 has very clean preamplifiers, and so boosting that in post shouldn't create a major problem. You're always going to be cognizant of bringing in good, healthy levels so that they're not sitting down by the noise floor. But you also don't have to push these really hard because you're not compensating for really noisy preamplifiers. So if it's a scripted piece though, and I know that there's not any laughing or shouting or anything like that, I'll probably go up closer to -12 just as a setup there. So if I pop back out now to the main menu here, or actually to the main screen here, I now have channel number 1 is represented here with a vertical meter, and then the stereo mix, the mix of all of our microphones, is represented horizontally there at the top. Another thing I forgot to mention, I'm going to go back into channel 1. We did arm this channel. What that means is that this channel will be recorded as an isolated channel, so it'll be on its own separate track. In addition to, if we go back out, you'll see here we're also recording the stereo mix. The way I can tell that from just looking at the menu here is that there's the left and right, which they're probably really small. It's probably hard for you to see there. But those are both red, meaning that those are also armed. So if I were to go ahead and press record right now, which I can do with this joystick there. So now we're recording, and you can see that with the red glowing ring there. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording by pressing in. That recording that I just made will have 3 channels in it. It will have the left channel, the right channel of the mix, and it will also have an isolated channel for input number 1. Incidentally, because we're not panning anything and our fader set at 0, all 3 of those channels will be identical. Now, if I were to pull this fader down, watch what happens for fader 1. If I pull fader 1 down, I'm still getting level on the isolated input. This is just showing this is the pre-fader level here, but none of it's being sent, or very little of it's being sent to the mix, and so that's why you're seeing that difference there. If I bring this back up to 0, and in fact I can double check that I'm at 0. There we are at 0. Now they're coming in at the exact same level, so they're both peaking, about -15 or so. So that's how, now -12. So that's kind of the first step here. That's how we would set up our boom microphone. Let's go ahead and get into channel number 2 and start setting up our lavalier microphones, our wires, or wireless microphones as they're called. Those are all, by the way, different names. On production sets, often they call them wires, which is kind of ironic because they're wireless mics, but I guess the term came with, hey, can you please go get those actors wired up, meaning go put body pack transmitters on them along with lavalier microphones. So we'll go into channel number 2 here. All right, now there are a couple things, I don't actually have these powered on yet, so we actually need to go take care of that first. So I'm going to pop back out to the main menu, and I'm going to scroll down here to Super Slot. That's what this is referred to, the SL2. And then I'm going to go into my options, and the first item on the list here is receiver slot power. So I need to send power to slot number 1, which is what I'm doing right now. So it's going to detect what type of receiver we have there as it powers it on. And you can see this is starting to do a little bit of flashing here. Okay, looks like we're good there. I can pop back out to these menus here. Now you can see we have two channels here that are looking for something. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a transmitter here. Turn that on. You can't see that, but this one's at 518/200. So you can see now we're getting a signal there. That's what the little green indicates there. It's the strength of the signal. And I'll set that up there. It's actually, we've got a lot going on in this room, and I don't have any antennas. You'll notice here I don't have the antennas attached. So this takes diversity antennas, so two antenna inputs. I don't have anything attached there, so we're not getting the strongest of signal. And that's what that indicates there. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So let's pop back out here, go back into channel number 2. Now I need to choose where we're getting audio for channel number 2. So the way I do that again is I press on this one, and instead of getting it from microphone input number 2 or XLR input number 2 over here on the left-hand side, I'm going to come down here and say, okay, this is coming in from slot A1. All right, and then we can also do the receiver setup here if we wanted to. So right now we have the frequency that's selected, and it's showing the overall signal level there as well. We don't have any audio coming in because I forgot to grab a lavalier microphone, so I'll go do that right now. 1 second. Okay.
So does the receiver include the mic? Because when you had it by the mic,
it does. Yeah, there was you probably noticed that RF interference on my microphone when we had it really close. So I'm just going to connect here a little Countryman B6 to the transmitter. And in fact, you may hear that again as I have it really close to the microphone.
Nothing yet.
Okay, probably no levels yet. All right, let's come back to channel 2. Channel 2 is powered off. Remember, we have to turn our input on here. And we're going to turn that to unity, so 0 dB. There we go. Now we're getting level there. And then I would control the input gain on the transmitter itself. So that's generally the approach that you would take, is you want to get your gain stage set up earliest in the chain first. So over here on the transmitter, let me just show you. Actually, let's come. Here we go. We're going to come into our menu. Here's the audio gain. So we have it set to 33 dB of gain, if I'm reading that right. So you would set it up here, and again, you're going to kind of tune it in for what you're looking for on here. So depending, again, if you have scripted pieces that you know there's not going to be a lot of modulation, not a lot of up and down in terms of loudness or volume of the person talking, then you can push those levels a little harder if you needed to. But okay, so there we are on channel number 2. Channel number 2 is armed. Again, if we wanted to arm it, we can disarm it here. That's this channel there. So now it's disarmed. What this means in practical terms, if I come back out here, whoops, let's go back out here. There we are. Okay. So now you can see channel number 2, it's showing level, but it's all kind of grayed out. That's because we disarmed it. If I arm it again, and actually let me turn the fader down on channel 1 altogether. Well, look what's happening. I'm still getting input on the mix. Why is that happening? Well, if you disarm channel 2, it is still getting sent to the mix. It's just not getting recorded on its own. So it'll be recorded as part of the mix, but it will not be recorded to its own isolated channel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bump that back up. Let's come into channel 2. Let's arm it. Asks us if we're sure. We are sure. And we come back out. Okay, now I have my boom microphone and my lavalier number 1 set up. Let's go ahead and do channel number 3 here. So we're going to pop into channel 3. First up, I'm going to go ahead and take that out and get that. Oh, actually, we're going to leave it down low for now. We'll turn the fader to 0 for now. All right, we're going to come into this menu, and I want to choose slot A2. So I want to get audio from a second transmitter into this receiver. So A2. Okay, coming back out. All right, now I need to turn channel number 2's transmitter on. Go ahead and power that up. All right, this one is at 518,200. Let's actually go back into here and look at this should be at 524,200. We still might get some intermodulation. We're not actually going to run through the whole process of frequency coordination, but let's just go ahead and get this. Just give me just a second here to get that set up. 524,200, there we go. Okay.
It's louder.
What's louder?
The interference.
Yeah, that's because I had it over here. Are you hearing it still?
No, it's louder than the first one.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, so we have that set. Again, I get to hook a microphone up to that. Give me 1 second. I'm going to connect the DPA 4160 to this transmitter. You hearing that again?
No.
Interference? Not this time. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think you had the antenna.
Okay. All right, let's check our levels here. So we need to increase the gain here. Audio gain. 21 dB. There we go. Let's go and we can probably increase that some. Checkity 1, 2, 3. Checking 1, 2, 3. A little bit more. There we go. And let's get them just kind of in the same ballpark there. Coming up. Okay. And actually, what I hadn't done, and this is where I just made a tactical error, the gain is at -18. So, if I were actually using headphones, this is where I'd need to be really careful. So I'm going to bump the gain back down on the transmitter. And then let's get us to unity or 0 on the trim here. Okay. All right. Now I should have the same levels on both the transmitter and on the receiver. And it looks like we do. So we can pull the gain up just a little bit more now. Let's hop back out to our main. Okay, that's coming in a little bit hotter than the other wires. Checking 1, 2, 3, about right there. Okay, so that's how we would go about setting those up. And again, we have all three of those armed and recording. So we'll get isolated channels for all three of those. Plus we'll get our left and right mix here. Again, if I needed to quickly take a microphone out of the mix, I could do that by just turning its fader all the way to 0. And if I wanted to disarm the recording, I would, of course, go into that channel menu and disarm it right here. You can also mute a channel very quickly here. So actually, I just panned it with the switches down here. So now I've muted that, and you can see it shows blue now instead of green. And these actually also glow green, meaning it's showing that you're getting level. And in fact, when you hit up against the limiter, there's hitting up against the limiter on channel 1, you can see it flashes sort of a gold color. So that's kind of a convenience feature. We also have something similar on the MixPre as well. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute this. There we go. And come back out to our main. So there's kind of that's how the process the basic high-level process of what you would run through. There are some additional features in the input menu that I wanted to kind of run through here. First of all, if you are going to do a stereo recording, you can link multiple channels together. That would allow you to adjust their trim and their faders in a unified way with a single knob. We also have our high-pass filter here right now, so I can turn that on. And we've set it here to 40 hertz. You can go all the way up to, looks like 320 hertz, which is a really aggressive high pass, all the way down to 10 hertz. Typically, I'll have it somewhere around 50 or so, just trying to be really, really mild and just manage any sort of rumble in the space. We do have a phase invert, so if you're recording multiple microphones and you're getting kind of a weird, hollow, strange sound, you can also flip the phase here, and that might make that just a little bit better, make it a little easier to listen to. And you can actually choose the delay as well. So if you wanted to delay a particular mic, so here, for example, I have 2 wireless channels coming in. Some wireless systems, particularly digital systems, not usually the analog systems, but digital systems take some time, so they introduce some latency. If I wanted to get my boom mic back in sync with them, if I know how much latency I have, how many milliseconds, I can dial that in here on the boom track, and then they'll be much better synced in the recording. So that's what the delay allows you to do here, and when you might want to use it. Okay, we also have a limiter. The settings for the limiters are in other parts of the menu, and we'll go take a look at those. We also have a compressor. Now, I wouldn't typically use the compressor if I am, recording for something where I'm going to have a post-production process, but it is here for if you're going to be doing something live or perhaps live streaming with it. That's a possibility here. I'm not going to go into the details, but it's nice to have that feature here. Whoops, I popped us out of the menu. All right, so that's the compressor currently off. We do, you also can tell it whether you want to record the isolated channel pre-fader or post-fader. So what that means is, do you want the isolated channel to take into account where you have the fader set? Normally I have this set to pre-fader. That's kind of the default, the standard mixing practice, I guess. But you can change that to post-fader if you do want the fader to affect what's being recorded to that isolated channel. So that's an option as well. There also is an EQ here, so you can apply some EQ if you need to. Again, not something I would typically do if there's going to be a post-process, but if there is going, if you're doing something live, it's nice to have that feature there available. Here's where you turn on the auto mix. We don't currently have it on, so I'm going to go ahead and go into the menu for the auto mixer. We have actually two types of auto mixers. We have the Dugan and we have MixAssist. So the difference between those is the MixAssist is actually something, for those on the MixPre, you might be familiar with that. That is the auto mix algorithm that was developed, I believe, by SoundDevices. And then the Dugan auto mixer is actually licensed from Dan Dugan and uses kind of a different approach. My sense overall is that MixAssist tends to be a little bit more aggressive. So if you're in a controlled environment, it can give you a kind of a cleaner mix potentially. What Dugan does so well is that Dugan works really well if people start talking over each other in particular. It does a really nice job of kind of managing that whole experience and keeping things under control there. We can go ahead and turn on our auto mixer. We've also indicated here that we're going to be using the ones that show in purple mean that the auto mixer is engaged. Those that are not in purple, the auto mixer is not engaged. So we'll come back to that. But in this case, I might want to auto mix just my lavalier microphones here, for example. All right, and so what that's going to do is that instead of me having to turn these faders or to adjust these faders to feed the mix, the left and right mix, with how much of each of those channels I want to send to the mix, this will do that for me. It's not going to touch how much of the boom microphone goes into the mix. I'm going to do that manually, but now I can have Dugan, Mr. Dan Dugan is like inside of my mixer taking care of the mix for me. So that's how you would set up the auto mix there. And in fact, if we come back out, yeah, that's how that works there. All right. We also have NoiseAssist on this one. So we have our noise suppression, and I can go ahead and enable that. And of course, we're going to, I don't want to use the Cedar DNX. Cedar DNX is a different type of noise suppression you can use. I don't have that installed on this one, but I can choose where I want to apply the noise suppression. I can apply it to an individual channel, or I can apply it to the left and right mix. I can apply up to 2 instances with my license. So I could do it to both a left and right mix if I wanted to, or just the left mix. And that allows me to do a little bit of real-time noise reduction. Again, this is the type of thing that I would typically only use live. I would not use it for something that's going to have a post-process. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and actually disable the noise suppression for now. Whoops. Disabled, and we will go back. All right, you'll notice now that the meters look a little different. We have these purple bars here, and that's indicating what the auto mixer is doing in terms of how much of each of those channels are being sent to the mix. So if I pull down this right now, what you're seeing in the mix now is just the 2 lavalier microphones. And it's defaulting to input number 2. You can see when I'm talking, it's sending mostly channel 2 to the mix. So that's what it looks like when it's active there. All right, what else have have we covered? Do we need to cover here? I get the fader back up to where it should be, roughly. Okay, we also have our channel routing here, so I can decide where I want to send this channel. So right now it's going to the left channel and the right channel of the mix, or sorry, the left mix and the right mix. But I can also send it to multiple buses, and that's another thing that the 8 series has, is multiple buses, so you can create these various mixes. So for example, why would you want multiple mixes? If you are live streaming and record and live, well, what they call live to tape, which is kind of an old term, but what that means is that you're doing live audio plus you're also doing a recording. And so you might want to send different things to each of those. For the recording, you might want to send something that's a little bit different than what you're using for the live audience. So this gives you some of those options here. Another way you could use this potentially is if you wanted to do some noise reduction, but you weren't, you also wanted to have another bus that was not touched by noise reduction. You could do that here. Set up one bus that would have the noise reduction and another bus that doesn't. So you have, again, those two options there. So that's what the bus or the channel settings does. Whoops, and we popped out again. All right. All right, you can also copy your settings from one channel to another. So that's what this little thing does for you here. So you can just choose where you want to copy those settings. And you can also choose which settings you want to copy, whether it's your EQ, high pass filter, compressor, limiter, so on and so forth. So we'll come back in. We're not going to copy for now. And then when you're in this channel, right now you can see it's set to pre-fader listen 1. So we're hearing, if I were to put my headphones on right now, I'd just be hearing input number 1, nothing else. And so that allows me to make sure that I'm getting clean audio into that channel as I'm getting it set up. We have these along the bottom here. Again, if I wanted to mute, I can mute. I can use a slate mic really quickly. So for whatever reason, I wanted to just talk in with there's a little slate mic right here on the front. That would bypass the mic that we have connected. We could do that very quickly. Here's your pan, so I can pan right, center, or left if I need to do that. And here, of course, is our arm control. So that is the whole channel menu there. All right, couple other things. Of course, you can look at your power here. You have 4 different potential power inputs here. Or actually, I guess I should say you kind of have 2, or 3, excuse me. So we have 2 Sony L series battery sleds on the back. I don't have those connected at the moment. And then I'm getting the input from the 4-pin power input over here on the right-hand side. That's coming from my battery distribution system. So the battery distribution system is handling the balancing of all of those batteries. And then over here I have my timecode battery. So the timecode battery is a battery inside the 888 that gets charged by whatever power source you're using externally. So that's just showing its current charge level. And in fact, if I turn this off, you will see this is going to flash here. This is now powering the timecode clock inside the 888 with that battery, that internal battery that's been charged recently. So if I turn it back on, our timecode should still be intact from when we started earlier today. And yes, it's been on for almost 3 hours here, it looks like. Okay, other things in the menu. We can take a look at our channel setup. Oh, also you can do other things here. Those L-series battery sleds on the back, you can actually charge those up when you are connected to other power supplies. That's a lot of current flowing through this thing. I don't typically do that, but you can do that if you needed that option. For our channel setup, there are a variety of settings in there. You can set your phantom voltage. So you can either do 12 volt or 48 volt on that. When you do go into a channel menu, the PFL mode, the pre-fader listen mode, you can choose it to either auto, to pre-fader, or post-fader. I'm going to go ahead and leave that at auto. And then you can actually drop the gain if you needed to, or actually boost the gain, excuse me, if you needed to when you're listening pre-fader. Just another way to make it, like if you need to really quickly try and solve a problem where you're getting some sort of noise on one channel and you're not sure which channel it is, being able to quickly go through the different channels and listen for that noise is really helpful. And that's what that setting would allow you to do, is kind of boost that gain just a little bit so you're 100% on that channel and you can understand what's going on there. Mentioned this already. Channels 9 through 16 would be controlled here. Again, you can just go in. It's the exact same menu we just ran through. So that's what that allows you to do.
I have some questions.
Oh, we should probably pause for questions. Actually, it's a good time. We've got a long way in. Okay, let's go ahead and switch back over to the questions and take a look at what we've got going there.
Okay, so give me just a moment. I have to scroll up. Okay.
All right. First, Greg, can you assign gain function to the larger knob? Well, in essence, you can do that by switching it, Greg. Let's go ahead and go back over to the overhead cam here. For the ISO setting here, if I change this to post, in essence, this becomes a gain knob while I'm recording for the ISO channel. It's sort of, as you know, sort of. But that does allow you to adjust essentially the trim as you're recording. But there is no way to say this is now the trim knob as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware. Good question, Greg. B&H has the 888 listed at $9,200. That is a serious chunk of change. It is indeed. I actually bought it before. The price has gone up. Here's the thing with... there's another one. The 8 series is also unobtainium right now due to supply chain, much like everything else pro audio. Yeah, things are getting harder and harder to get your hands on right now. Yes, it is a tool for certain jobs. It's not just a hobby piece of equipment. It is definitely much more of an investment. I will say that when it first was launched, it was more in the $7,000 range. But when you're working, with companies much smaller like SoundDevices, they're for at least our 8 series recorders, they're not selling thousands and thousands and tens and tens of thousands of these. So it's a very different market than it is for consumer devices. So you have to understand in that case, it happens with the Aton and their Kantar X3. I saw that they just did a price increase. You'll see that with a lot of the pro audio gear. The prices will actually increase over time as opposed to decrease like you're typically used to seeing with consumer products. It's just a completely different market, and they're not having the benefit of being able to produce thousands and thousands of units, and so they don't get a lot of those efficiencies in terms of cost. So it's a very different type of thing. But yes, it's an expensive piece of gear for sure.
You have an observant person.
Linda says, so you use IKEA batteries too? Yes, they're actually quite good. Although I will say I'm actually switching to some lithium rechargeables now. But yeah, the IKEA nickel metal hydrides are not bad. Pretty good.
We're still getting fuzz.
Still getting fuzz. I'm going to go ahead and turn those off because I've got this too close to the... I've got a tight setup here in terms of physical space. Are there any other questions there, Danny?
Yep.
Okay.
Any comments?
All right, random geocacher. If 888 has even more features than MixPre in advanced mode, it is not necessarily a great purchase for non-pros regardless of price. At least I have problem finding things I use rarely in menus. Yeah, no, I completely agree that this is not the right tool for everybody. I think that there is a time and a place for something like an 888 versus a MixPre, and I think that for many of us that are producing our own shows where we're also a participant on the show, MixPre totally makes sense. In fact, it's an amazing tool for that kind of situation with its auto mix feature, its limiters, its very high quality preamplifiers, its fairly simple menu structure. Yeah, absolutely. The MixPre it's all about choosing the right tool for the job. The only reason I'm running through this, just to be 100% clear again, is not to suggest that everyone should aim to buy one of these at some point. It's really about, if someday you do work on a job, or if you're just curious, what is it that these mixers do that are so, make them so expensive? Yeah, their audio quality is very, very good, but it's a lot of other features as well. There's all that the bus routing. There are way more outputs on this. In fact, I've got the main left and right output. I've got an X1 output, X2 output, X3, X4 output, X5 and 6 output, a headphone output, of course, two returns actually. So I can set up comms, for example. So in that case, if I'm working on a set, I am the mixer. I also have a boom operator and a utility. I can communicate with them as well, all through the 888. So they're able to hear the production audio, plus I'm able to send each of them a unique mix. If, for example, the boom operator just wants the boom microphone, or wants the boom microphone in the left ear, I could even do a stereo send. So there are just lots of little things that take place on the bigger productions that you don't typically need for, a little live stream you're doing from your house, like this. All right, from Christopher, Dugan is included or an add-on license? In the case of the 888, when I bought it, it was included. In fact, actually, when I bought it, they hadn't introduced it yet, and it was part of a free update. But I think it's still free. The Dugan is they licensed that as part of the cost of the 888 and the 833 and the Scorpio. So I believe it's included. That may have changed, but I think that's the case when I bought it. Cedar noise reduction is very nearly magical. It is, and you can actually add the licenses for that. It's not cheap, but it's way cheaper to buy it as a plugin for your 8 series than it is to buy a Cedar DNS dedicated box, and it's much more compact if you already are working with a mixer like this. It is a real lifesaver when doing live streaming. Yes, absolutely agree. It'd be really useful for that. Does the 888 have compression and gain settings per channel? How about effects? So yes, if we come back over here to the overhead, you'll notice here we do have a compressor right here. Now, when you're talking about effects, again, keep in mind, this is a production sound mixer, field mixer. It's not really made for music, so it's not going to have reverbs and things like that. But it does have a limiter, it does have a compressor, it does have an EQ. So here's the compressor. Whoops, there we go. So we've got a compressor, we've got an EQ, we do have the auto mixing, we do have the noise reduction. So again, very focused much more on production sound than on music mixing. So if you're looking for something with all those kind of effects that you would see in a lot of mixing boards, this doesn't typically have those kind of things, but it does have some of the basics here that are going to make things really good. Mostly for spoken word, to be honest. That's mainly what this is really designed for. RAM Geocacher, as a professional who uses the 888 often, how easy is it to use in practice? For example, reading the screen in the field, finding menu options, etc. I think it would be hard for me. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're operating at that level, it is something you get used to. It becomes muscle memory. You know where things are at. I actually find I've been working with the SoundDevices mixers for a number of years now. So I started on a 633. So if you've done that and you've used it over a course of years, it becomes very second nature to you to get to get where you need to go to solve a particular problem or to do something that you need to do. So I find it quite easy, actually. It's muscle memory. How does this compare to the Kantar? Well, the Kantar has a much bigger screen. The Kantar is a very different approach to things. The Kantar seems to be to very much appeal to people. Well, it's just packaged differently, really. I mean, you can get, I think it's called the CL16, which is a fader control surface for the 8 series. It comes with a very large, relatively large screen, much larger than what you have on the mixer itself. So the 888 is something, it's kind of a hybrid where you could use it in a bag, but you could also use it on a cart. And the Kantar is really made to use on a cart. Could you use it in a bag? I suppose you could rig up some way to do it. But I don't think the Kantar X3 itself would be really a great bag mixer. So they kind of took a different approach. Another thing that the Kantar does is they have transformers on each of the inputs, as I understand it. So it's going to have a little bit more of that kind of, Rupert Neve sound to it. A little bit. It sounds great on all the samples I've heard. The 888 sounds great on all the samples I've recorded as well. So I don't think there's a massive differentiator there, but that is one thing. So they're just different companies who have come at it from slightly different angles. So I think they both have their place. One thing I think on the Kantars, I think you have to have adapter cable. If you're going to feed a lot of full-size XLR cables, you have to have adapters for that. Whereas on this, you actually get 4 full-size XLRs. A little thing, I guess. So I think if I had to characterize it, the biggest difference is probably the Kantar is purpose-made for cart use. I would say the 888 and the 833 certainly are more hybrid. They could be used in a bag or they could be used on a cart. Okay. All right. Are we ready to do our Q&A? We probably need to because we only have 15 minutes left. Andrew asks, I have a stereo dialogue recording that I've extracted from a camera video file. The left and right tracks look almost identical, but there are very minor differences, almost imperceptible, but they are evident in the waveforms. I've used the left track to process the dialogue in Adobe Audition and Isotope RX, and used that track to make a final dual mono track, and I'm pleased with the results. I'm only familiar with editing mono tracks, and I'm just wondering if there are any ways I could have done this differently or any things that I need to consider for next time. It's a great question, Andrew. The first question I would have is that when you get a stereo dialogue recording, the first question I would ask is, was it purposely recorded as stereo? Was there an intent there? Are you trying to capture and maintain and retain and perhaps even emphasize stereo effects, or was it just an accident that, for whatever reason, it ended up getting recorded as stereo? So I would say I would generally approach it like you did, unless there was specifically some reason for it to be stereo. So usually for dialogue, the practice is generally, at least for filmmaking, they will record those mono and then they will do any sort of stereophonic or surround mixing in post to create that kind of three-dimensional or spatial audio effect. So that's generally how it's approached. So in short, I would do it exactly the same way you just described doing it. All right. Dennis asks, is there a workaround where you can do a live session with MixPre 6.2 with 2 to 4 microphones and use NoiseAssist on all of them? I guess some sort of routing and applying NoiseAssist to left or right bus is possible, but how do you set that up, and what about stereo then? So that's a great question, Dennis. I would like to do that. I don't think we have time to do that today, but I think maybe next week we can come in to do that. But I have some questions for you first. I need a little bit more information to really do the demo in the best way possible to kind of give you the most value. And my questions are you streaming music or spoken word or both? So maybe mono is okay if you're just doing spoken word anyway. Which microphones are you using, and where do you have those microphones positioned? Are they close mic'd or are they boomed? A little bit farther away? And then what kind of noise are you trying to address in the space? Is it just, regular room tone? Is there some noisy HVAC or something else that's creating a lot of noise? I'm just curious about that as well, because I think NoiseAssist may or may not be the right tool for this job. The right tool for this job might actually be MixAssist for you, but that's why I just need a little bit more information, and we can take a look at that and show you how to set that all up. So good question there. Bob has a question, and let me give you a background. So Bob's talking in the context of a SoundDevices MixPre, and we've had a little bit of an email exchange about the headphone presets and how, when you're using the MixPre as an audio interface, how do you set it up? And what do all the settings mean as far as headphone routing? And so he says this, I'm assuming that the headphone USB 1.2 is just a default preset to listen through headphones, the audio output from the computer. So if so, that means that there are underlying settings to the preset, and realizing that the headphone jack can be configured to receive input from various outputs, I was wondering if you knew what the underlying actual settings are. I further assume that if one knows what the actual settings are, one could configure out, duplicate the preset USB 1 and 2. For me, it is all about understanding the language, and once that's established, the reasoning for various options becomes much clearer and easier to use whatever the equipment, software, etc. happens to be. My analogy would be learning and understanding a programming language before one can write a program. All right, Bob, that's a fine question here. In the case of, and actually we can, we don't really have that set up here on the 888. Let me, if you give me just a second here, I'm going to get the 888 out of the way here, and I'm going to bring in a MixPre that we can look at just to help our discussion here. All right. And, whoa, that was an ugly noise. Okay, let's go to the overhead cam, Danny. All right, so we have a MixPre, and it's pretty far away. So let me just move the camera down. Actually, let's go back to the overhead cam for now, so we don't give anyone motion sickness here.
Wait,
Sorry, to the main cam. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to bring this camera down some so that we can see the screen a little better. Refocus. Okay, I think that'll do. Let's go back to the overhead camera. All right, that's going to be a little better for us, I think. All right, so if we come in here to the headphone presets, we can choose what we want to listen to. And we have a variety of choices here. We have our left-right stereo. We can do it in left-right mono. We can listen to the USB 1 and 2. That's the audio coming back from the computer via USB, if I have this set up as a USB audio interface. And then I have various presets that I've created as well. So preset 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the MixPre 3. And I can edit those as well. So, Bob, I think the answer to your question in regards to USB 1 and 2, let me just show you what that looks like. If you were able to go into the menu like you can with the presets and actually set up what USB 1 and 2 is doing, I think you're going to be, I don't know if you'll be surprised or just maybe disappointed. I'm not sure. But I'm going to recreate that here. So I'm going to come in here, turn that one off, turn that one off. That's what the USB 1.2 preset looks like if you were able to come in and take a look at it. So it would be sending the USB feed from the computer, USB 1 channel from the computer into your left ear on your headphones, and it would send the USB 2 from the computer into your right ear on the headphones. That's all. That's all it's doing. Very simple. Now, if you were to go and take a look at your computer, and in fact, let's come over here. Go ahead and go to the Mac if you would. Audio MIDI setup. Now, you can make some changes over here on the Mac side, for example, or if you're using Windows, you could also make some changes there, but you could actually come in here and define what's being sent, both, how much of each channel. So if you wanted to do some kind of unique things in terms of, let's say you're recording into a digital audio workstation, you want to be able to hear maybe some music playing back from the computer, but you don't want to hear your voice that you're also recording back from the computer. And that's where you could essentially turn off your voice. You could actually, if we had control of that, there's some additional routing you could do here. And it's not something I've done a whole lot of, but this is something you could come in here and change some of these settings as well. So that's where some of those underlying settings are. Let's go back to the overhead cam. So that's, hopefully that helps, Bob. That's all it's doing. That's all the USB 1.2 preset is doing. So come back. Now our preset 2 is exactly the same as USB 1.2. We could give that a name if we wanted to as well. So that is an explanation of what we got going on there. So let's go back to the chat and see what questions we have coming in on the chat. Okay, first from Shoji, a little off topic. Any idea what signal processing is used for the SoundDevices MixPre NoiseAssist? Yes, there's actually a document or a page over on the SoundDevices website that describes what it's doing. So let's do a search here. Go SoundDevices. We'll come to SoundDevices. Let's go ahead and pull that up. And support home, we're going to go ahead and accept that. Help you find NoiseAssist. Okay. Here is a post that talks about NoiseAssist Simplified. It gives you a sense for what they use in terms of algorithm. It's a pretty short article, but it gives you a sense for how they're doing the noise assist or the noise reduction. So hopefully that gets you some information you're looking for there. Thanks, Michael, for the super chat. I very much appreciate that. Glad that you're enjoying the learning here. Regarding Bob's question, you did an awesome mix minus routing video back in the day. My MixPre 6 is constantly routed like you showed then. since COVID with 99% remote it's been used a lot. Yeah, so there's another one, Bob, that you may look up. Just do a search for Curtis Judd, MixPre, Mix Minus, and you'll find that video as well. Give you a little bit more insight to how that works. And there's Bob. As I wrote in subsequent email, I tried that, but probably I had something else set up wrong in the Mac or in DaVinci Resolve. Thanks for answering my question. You got it. Thanks for submitting the question. Something new, firmware version 7.16 for all MixPre models is now available. Version 7.16 introduces new routing options for USB 3 and 4. So even more fun we can have there with USB 3 and 4. I'll have to get that installed here on the MixPre. Thanks for that, Peter. Okay, Bartek. Curtis, if you will have time, could you compare Acusonus software to Isotope RX? I don't have the Acusonus plugins right now. I did a review of those, or a demonstration at least of those some time ago, probably 2 years ago. They were pretty decent. I found Isotope to work a lot. I could get stuff done faster with Isotope. The Acusonus plugins are pretty good. I'm just giving you my impressions right now. I don't know if you're looking for a full demonstration of the two, but what I found was that the noise reduction, there was one really neat noise reduction feature in the Acusonus noise reduction plugin, at least the more advanced one, and that was that you could set up a third microphone and feed that into the noise reduction algorithm to essentially seed it with information that it could use to reduce noise. In my practical tests, that didn't necessarily result in any better noise reduction than I'm able to achieve in Isotope RX, but it's an interesting concept, and I don't know if they've developed that since then to make it more effective, but that I thought was a very interesting approach that they were using there. I think the Acusonus plugins are generally made to be a lot easier to use, so they generally try to focus on having very few controls to make them very simple to use. And that's those are my overall impressions. I just felt like I had a little bit more control and I could work a little bit more quickly with RX. So that's why I've chosen to mainly focus on RX. But the Acusonus plugins are not bad. They're pretty good too. All right, for Mike. I finally sorted my noise problems when using the Sennheiser XSWs, using the Zoom F4 as a front end and then using the F4 sub out at mic level into the camera. Excellent sound. That's so good news. Thanks for sharing that, Mike. And I'm just trying to, so using the F4 as a front end. Okay, so you're not feeding them right into the camera. For whatever reason, you're getting that noise with the camera in the Sennheiser XSWs if you use them directly. That's interesting. Okay. Well, that Zoom F4, it's a great little device. Teachers, embarrassingly remedial question. Should I eliminate peak normalization from start of my post workflow? I always do loudness normalization at the end. I mainly do interview dialogue. No, I don't think you don't have to. Peak normalization is fine if you just want to get the most loudness you can out of what you have without doing any sort of compression first. That's a fine approach. And if you're just doing that as a staging type thing to get it, relatively close to where it will be in the end, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's a fine approach. Shoji, anything equivalent in Isotope RX to NoiseAssist? Well, for real-time processing, yes. And actually in post as well, but there's the voice denoise plugin, which you can use. It's fast enough to use on a real-time basis. It will introduce some latency. The nice thing about NoiseAssist is that it only has, the latency is very short. It's like just a few milliseconds, less than 10 if I remember correctly. But in RX, the voice denoise can do similar. I think there is more latency than that, but it is fairly quick, so you can use it on a live basis as well under most circumstances. So that's an option there. John, outside of the price difference and channel count, what advantages does the 888 have over the 688? It has more flexible routing, so it has the bus multiple buses. It has each input is fully routable, which I don't believe was the case on the 688. So literally each of those controls on the front here. So this fader and this trim, you could assign that to any input. I don't believe you can do that on the 688. It has Dante in and out, so you can get audio remotely over an Ethernet network if you have a Dante network set up, or a Dante series of devices set up. So that's another advantage. I don't believe NoiseAssist or Cedar DNS were available on the 688. As far as I'm aware, they're not. So there's some additional features there. They've added compressors, a compressor and an EQ here. I don't believe the 688 had those. The difference with the architecture basically is that they're now running, the 8 series is running on FPGA, so they can program new features, which they kind of really couldn't do very well with the 6 series, the 688, 633. And the 664 was a completely different beast. It was a, I think it was a, I can't remember how many channels, but it didn't record all the ISO channels necessarily if you had a large channel count. So there were some limitations there as well. So what they've done is they've tried to open up and make it a much more flexible architecture is the main difference. Okay, we're good. And we're at time. Oh my goodness. So that time goes so quickly when we're having fun here. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. I hope you're having a good time, making some good sound out there. Get out there and make some more good sound, and we will talk to you again soon. Take care, everybody.